It arrived with the dawn of my 64th birthday. A simple envelope, devoid of a return address or stamp, bearing only my name, inscribed in a handwritten, familiar slant. Marla. It nearly slipped by me unnoticed. It had been slipped beneath the front door, merging seamlessly with the bills and circulars that cluttered the entryway. The envelope appeared unremarkable at first glance, yet the peculiar elegance of the handwriting stirred an unsettling feeling in my gut. My hand lingered above it for a fleeting moment before I finally grasped it. My heart raced with anticipation. I settled onto the couch, gently prying it open, a peculiar chill enveloping me even as the morning sun poured through the living room windows. Within lay a birthday card, the sort that is all too familiar, adorned with delicate watercolor flowers and gentle blue lettering that conveyed a simple message: wishing you peace and joy. For years, tranquility had eluded me, yet it was not that absence that stole my breath away. It was the script within. I had a feeling it would come to this. Each loop, each line. In our youthful days, Ellis would slip charming little notes into my lunch. Remember to wear a smile. Return home safely. I already feel your absence. It had been 2 decades since I last encountered his words, and now they were gazing back at me, undeniable and vivid. Wishing you a joyful birthday, Marla. I have always remained here. Search the basement. The card slipped from my grasp and tumbled onto the carpet below. A wave of pallor washed over me. Motion eluded me. Not a single blink was possible. Thoughts surged through my mind, darting in every conceivable direction. Ellis, my husband, has been absent since 2005. By the river, the police discovered his car left behind, a silent testament to the unfolding mystery. Within, they unearthed his wallet, his phone, his wedding band, all except for him. It was suggested to me that it was probably a case of suicide. They spoke of the presence might. At times, the remains are lost to the depths, never to be found. A memorial was held, marked by an empty coffin. Companions, hearty dishes, tranquility. I mourned his loss. I loathed him. I extended my forgiveness to him. Once more, I found myself in the depths of sorrow. For the next 2 decades, I found myself in solitude, burdened by countless questions that lingered without answers. And now we arrive at this moment. I grasped the card once more, cradling it as if it were a source of searing heat. I flipped it over, probing for any additional clues. Absent of signature, devoid of date, just that solitary sentence, crafted in a manner uniquely characteristic of Ellis. I have always remained. My mouth was parched. I rose gradually and made my way to the hallway mirror, gazing at my reflection. My reflection appeared unchanged, neither older nor younger, simply astonished. I murmured, "No, this must surely be a jest." Yet, I found myself alone, devoid of any would-be pranksters. I no longer maintained close friendships. Brenna resided on the opposite coast now, and not a soul remained who recalled the anniversary of his vanishing. I approached the front door, swung it open, and surveyed the street in both directions. Not a soul. Only the gentle whisper of the wind through the leaves. A solitary newspaper rests forgotten in the driveway. Who might have placed it there? Who indeed? My heart raced within my chest as I gazed at the envelope once more. I pivoted and confronted the corridor that descended into the depths of the basement. The basement had remained shrouded in silence for 2 long decades. I had only managed to sweep it out once or twice a year. Storage space was unnecessary for me. I found no necessity for reminders. Yet, at that moment, my mind was consumed with one question. What did he mean? Search the basement. Could it be a metaphor? Is it a menace? A plea for assistance? I was reluctant to descend into that place, not by myself, not without the clarity I sought. Yet, I found it impossible to overlook. Yet, beneath the layers of panic and shock, another feeling stirred within. Anticipation. Not the kind that embodies innocence and joy, no. This hope bore sharp, uneven contours. It churned my stomach. Yet, it existed nonetheless. With a deep breath, I seized the flashlight from the drawer and made my way to the basement door. My hand quivered as I extended it toward the knob. Regardless of what lay ahead, one truth stood unwavering. The narrative I had woven for 2 decades was on the brink of transformation. In 2004, had you inquired about my existence, I would have labeled it as unremarkable, perhaps even tedious, yet in the most favorable manner. At the age of 43, I found myself in a marriage that had spanned more than 20 years with Ellis Granger, a man whose meticulousness extended even to the folding of his socks, executed with a precision reminiscent of military order, and who, in a curious ritual, always left 2 sips of coffee in the pot. In a humble 3-bedroom abode nestled within a serene Pennsylvania suburb, we found ourselves just distant enough from the city to be serenaded by the gentle chorus of crickets under the night sky. Ellis, a high school history teacher, was cherished by his students for his penchant for bad puns and his fervent enthusiasm for presidential trivia. He always remembered to turn off the oven, meticulously raked the leaves before the first frost, and held a steadfast belief in not replacing items until they had genuinely reached the end of their usefulness. That encompassed our 15-year-old dishwasher, and perhaps one could argue our marriage as well. Yet we toiled. We were in perfect harmony. We didn't engage in battle, at least not the boisterous sort. Together, we arrived at our decisions. Our vacations were meticulously crafted to align with Brenna's school breaks. Our days were woven with routines, steeped in rituals, and punctuated by the quiet jokes that belonged solely to us. During that time, I found myself employed part-time at the local library. My universe was modest yet serene. The morning unfolded with Ellis engrossed in the newspaper while I prepared his lunch. Always the same. Turkey and Swiss, apple slices, and a peanut butter cookie, which I knew he would inevitably share with a student who seemed to need a little sweetness in their day. The evenings held a serene stillness. Evening unfolded with dinner and dishes, followed by a tranquil moment on the porch where he immersed himself in grading papers, while I lost myself in the pages of mystery novels. Brenna, our daughter, was embarking on her 2nd year at college in Vermont, pursuing a major in environmental science. She reached out twice a week, each time bringing fresh news about composting initiatives, protests, or a professor she held in high regard. I felt a profound sense of longing for her, yet a swell of pride coursed through me. Ellis shared that sentiment, though he never expressed it in the same way I did. His expression of affection took on a more pragmatic form, as he sent her extra socks during the winter months and mailed her articles carefully clipped from the newspaper. He would muse that she would sense his thoughts of her. Upon reflection, our marriage lacked the spark of fireworks. Yet, amidst it all, there existed solace and comfort. After sharing so much time together, resembles love. Each Friday evening, we would place an order from Sal's Pizza. There was no need for words between us. Our desires were understood without question. I'll have half mushroom and black olive, while he prefers plain cheese. He consistently chose the film, often opting for something featuring spies or submarines, and I invariably drifted off to sleep midway through. He would gently rouse me from slumber as the credits began to roll, his familiar refrain echoing in my ears. "You missed the best part." It was a ritual, one he never failed to uphold. On Sundays, we strolled to the farmer's market, fingers intertwined. He consistently took on the burden of the bags, despite my repeated offers to help. Our conversations rarely ventured into the extraordinary. They typically revolved around the weather, local gossip, and the latest news of whose child was tying the knot. Yet, I never experienced a moment of boredom. I felt secure, embraced, as if the universe could shift around us, yet we would remain unchanged. That was what rendered everything that followed so difficult to accept, for nothing had seemed amiss. Not quite. There were no doors slamming shut, no hushed conversations on the phone during the witching hour, no traces of lipstick left by callers. He simply existed in that moment, steadfast, unsurprising, belonging to me. When discussions arise about the signs, the question often surfaces, were there not any hints to be found? I have pondered that question countless times. Perhaps there existed some. Perhaps they were so diminutive that I blinked and overlooked them entirely. Or perhaps, and this is the thought that lingers in my mind, he genuinely embodied all that he seemed to be, until he no longer did. The final birthday I shared with him was my 44th. He led me to a quaint diner nestled just beyond the town's edge. Simple pleasures, just pancakes and coffee. Yet, he ensured that a candle was placed in my slice of apple pie. The waitress's voice wavered, a discordant melody that drew applause from the crowd. In that moment, Ellis grasped my hand beneath the table, whispering, "You're still my favorite mystery." A smile crept across my face at that moment. It was the sort of remark he made frequently. Touch of cheese, a hint of mystery. In that moment, I believed he was implying that I had caught him off guard, maintained an intriguing existence. Now I find myself pondering whether he intended something altogether different. Yet, in that instant, within the confines of that diner, I held a steadfast belief in our connection. I held a deep faith in our existence, our narrative. I held the conviction that regardless of what lay ahead, retirement, the passage of time, perhaps stepping into the role of grandparents, we would navigate it side by side. I could never have foreseen that, in less than a year, he would be no longer with us. Or that 2 decades later, I would find myself in our living room, clutching a card that would dismantle everything I believed I understood about him and about myself. A subtle warning appeared, almost unnoticed. No significant conflict. There was no grand revelation, merely a neglected meal. The sun dipped below the horizon on the evening of our 24th wedding anniversary, September 12, 2004. I recall vividly, for I had marked it in bold red ink on the kitchen calendar many months prior. I had secured a table at a quaint Italian eatery in town, the very place where we had marked our 10th and 15th anniversaries with joy. I slipped into the familiar blue dress he had once remarked made my eyes resemble summer skies, and I even applied lipstick, something I hadn't taken the time for in years. When I donned my attire, Ellis was absent from the house. I imagined he had ventured out to select a present or perhaps to procure some flowers. I placed my phone on the windowsill and waited. 6 o'clock slipped by, followed closely by 6:30. At 7, the restaurant reached out to verify our plans for the evening. I attempted to reach Ellis, but it went directly to voicemail. By 8, I remained perched on the edge of our bed, adorned in full makeup and heels, gazing at the front door as if it might swing open of its own accord. My heart remained calm. What I felt wasn't panic. It resembled a state of bewilderment. An insidious, creeping pain settles in my chest. Ellis possessed a multitude of qualities, yet forgetfulness was not among them. He recalled birthdays, library due dates, and the expiration of the milk. That was a facet of his allure. How could he possibly let this slip from his memory? As he strolled in at 9:15, a look of surprise washed over his face upon seeing me in my dress. "Oh," he remarked, lingering in the doorway, "you're still awake." I remained silent. I was unable to. I struggled to swallow the lump that had taken residence in my throat. I attended a meeting while he persistently removed his jacket. Challenges with parents. The mother of the Williams child entered and refused to depart. Time slipped away from me. There is no need for an apology. Only that, as though that clarified it all. My gaze fell upon him, truly observed. His tie hung loosely, the shirt bore slight wrinkles, and a coffee stain marred the hem. He appeared utterly drained, oblivious to the disappointment that lingered before him. I finally confessed that I had made reservations. Our special day of remembrance. He blinked, momentarily caught off guard. Today is the day. In that moment, I sensed a change in the air. Not precisely between us, but rather within me. A delicate thread seemed to have unraveled. Nothing broke. Nothing was torn. Yet I sensed it, exactly as before. He stepped into the kitchen and pulled open the fridge door. "I can whip up some eggs for us," he suggested. I nearly found myself chuckling. Eggs. On the day we celebrate our love. Instead, I nodded slowly and made my way to the bathroom, locking the door behind me. There, I let my tears fall softly into a towel, careful to keep my sorrow from reaching his ears. On the following morning, a bouquet of carnations, neatly wrapped in plastic, adorned the kitchen table. Flowers from the gas station. It doesn't quite resonate with me. He was aware of that. Yet it remains a gesture of reconciliation. I felt the urge to be angry, yet a quiet voice within urged me to let it go, to not blow it out of proportion. He is weary. He is a human being. I convinced myself it would be a singular occurrence. Yet the solitary strolls arrived. The following week it began. He started to wander off on lengthy evening walks, keeping it a secret from me. He mentioned a desire to clear his mind, take a few steps, or contemplate lesson plans. He would depart immediately following dinner, not to return for more than an hour. Initially, I paid little attention to it. Each individual requires moments of solitude. The stillness brought me a sense of peace, truly. I would ignite a candle, brew a cup of tea, and immerse myself in a book in the living room, enveloped by the serene stillness of the house around me. Yet it evolved into a recurring motif. Each night, as if by a predetermined rhythm. He hardly uttered a word throughout dinner, then quietly slipped away. There shall be no embraces, not returning shortly, only the sound of footsteps descending the porch steps, followed by the quiet finality of a closed door. A curiosity began to stir within me about his true whereabouts. I once trailed him just 5 minutes after he departed. I entered my car and navigated the familiar loop of the neighborhood. Yet I never laid eyes on him. There was no indication of his presence, no footsteps to be heard, not a single recognizable silhouette gliding beneath the glow of the street lamps. Upon his return that evening, he appeared flushed and glistening with sweat. He mentioned that he had gone for a brief jog. I wished to pose additional inquiries. However, I did not. Perhaps, I suggested, we could take a stroll together tomorrow? He offered me a constrained smile and replied, "Sure." Yet, on the following night, he departed before the usual hour. Before I had the chance to set the dishes aside. It was at that moment that uncertainty began to take root. Insufficient grounds for accusation. Insufficient cause for alarm. Merely a murmur. A cool whisper lingers in the recesses of my thoughts. A sense of unease lingered in the air. Yet, I reminded myself that every marriage experiences its tranquil moments. I reassured myself that my thoughts were merely the product of paranoia. I reminded myself that love embodies patience. Affection is gentle and everything that entails. Silence was my choice. In the process, I overlooked the subtle fissures emerging just beneath my feet. It unfolded gradually, piece by piece. That aspect continues to resonate with me. The small cuts go unnoticed until you cast your gaze downward, only to discover the crimson evidence of your wounds. Following the overlooked anniversary and the solitary evening strolls, a certain dullness began to settle within Ellis. Perhaps it was something within me. Yet the man who once delighted in slipping me candy bars from the grocery store, simply for the joy of it, had grown silent, as if the world had muted him, and he remained blissfully unaware. We once engaged in conversations that transcended the mundane topics of Brenna or the weather. We truly connected, concerning literature, aspirations, and the anxieties that accompany the passage of time. We would lounge in bed, sharing laughter over our mutual confusion with Twitter and our ongoing neglect of that pesky, leaky faucet, which remained unfixed. Yet, discussions had dwindled to mere logistics. Have you settled the gas bill yet? A container of soup awaits in the fridge. I shall return home later than usual. Nothing further.
Seriously, no jokes.
There are no inquiries. There is an absence of warmth. One morning stands out vividly in my memory. I rose with the dawn to prepare breakfast for him. A true breakfast experience, beyond mere toast and coffee. I prepared the eggs just as he preferred. Eggs cooked to perfection, lightly seasoned with pepper, accompanied by a crisp slice of turkey bacon. I carefully sliced some melon and arranged it on one of the ceramic plates we had purchased during our anniversary trip to Asheville many years ago. Descending the stairs, he cast his gaze upon the plate and uttered a brief thanks before carrying it to the table. Avoiding eye contact, lacking a kiss on the cheek, merely a weary, flat expression of gratitude. He consumed his meal quietly, engrossed in the pages of the newspaper. I found myself seated opposite him, anticipating something. Perhaps a smile, a conversation, or a fleeting moment. No one arrived. As he departed for work, I lingered in the doorway, observing him make his way to the car. He offered no wave, nor did he cast a glance over his shoulder. That entire day unfolded with a sense of alienation, as if I were an outsider within the very walls that should have felt familiar. That summer, he ceased to share the same bedtime with me. Initially, he claimed he was up late grading papers. Then it turned into an inability to sleep. In the morning, I would discover him peacefully slumbering on the couch as I made my way downstairs. I made an effort to get things started. I would play the familiar tunes that once filled our kitchen with the rhythm of our dances. I would extend my hand toward him as we strolled down the driveway. I proposed a weekend escape, just the two of us. He offered a smile at that remark. A tense, courteous grin. "Everything feels incredibly chaotic at the moment," he remarked. Their nature was perpetually chaotic. In the end, I ceased my efforts. Not from a place of anger. I felt no anger. I felt weary from stretching out into an ever-expanding chasm, only to find my hand grasping at emptiness, longing for his touch that never came. The most challenging aspect wasn't the solitude. It was the absence of visibility. A particular ache settles in when you come to understand that the one you share your nights with has ceased to truly see you. You've settled into the very fabric of the environment, a constant hum in the periphery, a presence lingering in the periphery of their existence rather than occupying the spotlight. One Sunday at church, a woman inquired of Ellis about our well-being. He responded, as he always did, without so much as glancing in my direction. I offered a smile and a nod of acknowledgement. That had come to define my purpose. The wife with a smile and a nod. Later that week, I decided to get a haircut. Nothing too extreme, merely a touch to enhance my features and evoke a sense of renewal. Upon returning home, I slipped into a fresh blouse and prepared his beloved casserole for dinner. He remained oblivious, uttering not a single word, simply dishing himself a plate, consuming his meal in quietude, and then retreated to the basement. That was yet another matter. The subterranean chamber. He began to devote more hours to that place, claiming he was sorting through old boxes, yet I seldom heard any sounds of activity. The door clicked shut, the light flickered to life, and then there was nothing but the weight of silence stretching on for hours. At times, I would ascend to the pinnacle of the staircase and lend an ear. There was a moment when I called out, seeking assistance. He remained silent. I lingered in that moment, time stretching endlessly, before finally turning away, a quiet shame settling in for having even dared to ask. As time passed, I found myself diminishing, not in stature but in spirit. I ceased my incessant chatter, withdrew from sharing the details of my day, and abandoned the notion of orchestrating small surprises. It was as if I were cohabiting with a specter. Yet, spirits do not abandon coffee mugs in the sink. The laundry basket remains devoid of the socks you continue to fold. Their lips no longer brush against your forehead as a mere routine. Instead, you come to understand that this once tender gesture has lost its significance. Marriages, like all things, experience their own cycles. It was only when the humiliation struck, piercing and exposed, that I understood something much more profound had already vanished. The evening was set for Brenna's college graduation dinner, a warm night in early June of 2005. She had just traversed the stage in her green and silver cap and gown, radiating with pride. Of course, tears had fallen. Ellis offered a courteous clap. He hardly captured any moments on camera. He claimed he forgot to charge the camera, despite my having reminded him twice the night before. A modest dinner had been arranged for afterward. Only family and a handful of Brenna's friends and professors. A charming gathering at a quaint bistro close to campus. A venue adorned with soft, inviting lighting, where handwritten menus beckon and linen napkins exude an air of elegance that seems almost too refined for their purpose. I had donned a delicate cream blouse, a piece that Brenna adored, and I carried with me a charm bracelet adorned with 4 petite silver leaves, one for each year she had successfully navigated. Ellis arrived after the expected time, perhaps just a mere 10 minutes, yet, upon his entrance he appeared hurried. He offered Brenna a brief side hug, murmured something regarding the traffic, and settled into the seat next to her, barely casting a glance in my direction. I dismissed it casually. The night belonged to Brenna. There was an unmistakable sense that something was amiss. He repeatedly checked his watch, casting furtive glances toward the entrance as if anticipating the arrival of another. I made an effort to connect with him, inquiring about a book he had been immersed in and a student he was guiding. His responses were brief, courteous yet aloof. His tone was sharp, as if he lacked the energy for complete sentences. It was then, amidst the sweet indulgence of dessert, that it occurred. One of Brenna's professors, Dr. Langston, a kind man with a gentle voice and a passion for ecology, leaned across the table and inquired of Ellis, "So, what does your wife do?" His gaze was fixed directly upon me. Before I had the chance to speak, Ellis interjected, "Oh, she's merely the wife." He uttered it with a light-hearted chuckle, accompanied by a casual shrug, as if it were innocuous, as if it were a jest that all would grasp. Yet there was silence all around, even from Dr. Langston. He merely blinked, offering a constrained smile before deftly shifting the conversation. A flush of warmth surged to my cheeks. Uncertainty clouded my thoughts, leaving me at a crossroads. I cast a fleeting look at Brenna, her brow furrowed in discontent as she regarded her father. Her gaze met mine, tinged with a hint of remorse, as though she bore the weight of an unspoken transgression. My throat constricted. I nudged my dessert plate aside, a wave of nausea washing over me. Ellis remained oblivious. The remainder of the evening faded into a haze. Amidst the lively chatter that surrounded me, I felt encased in a transparent barrier, offering smiles at the appropriate moments, nodding in agreement, and laughing at jokes that eluded my ears. The echo of those words lingered in my ears, merely the wife. I found myself revisiting it over and over, the inflection, the nonchalance, the effortless disregard for the life I had offered him, for the essence of my being. I was not merely an unfamiliar face. I was the woman who nurtured our daughter, maintained the rhythm of our home, championed his ambitions, consoled him in the wake of his parents' passing, and refined every cover letter he had ever dispatched. Long before any of these people had even heard his name, I was the one who had loved him. And now I found myself merely the wife? As the bill arrived, I extended my hand toward it. My hands trembled as I retrieved my wallet from my purse. Ellis made no suggestion of sharing it. He simply reclined and remarked, "You've got this, don't you?" As if we hadn't just celebrated nearly 25 years of marriage. In that instant, a fracture occurred within me, sharp and unyielding. It was never about the money, transcended mere words. It was in the manner of his utterance, with utter apathy, as if I were merely an ornament in his night, as though I could have been anyone at all. That night, I wept in the dim confines of our hotel bathroom, burying my face in a towel to stifle the sound. He simply entered, offering no knock or inquiry about my well-being. He retired for the night. I reclined on the frigid tile floor for nearly an hour, attuned to the steady drone of the air conditioner, grappling with the memory of when I last felt like his true partner rather than merely a stand-in. From that night onward, I ceased my efforts to demonstrate my significance to him. In that instant, I realized I did not, at least not for him. That moment marked the inception of my quiet exit, occurring even prior to his final departure. Following Brenna's graduation dinner, an unspoken change occurred between Ellis and me, one that would never revert to its former state. I ceased inquiring about his evening destinations. I ceased to bring up our weekly calls with Brenna. I ceased the ritual of brewing coffee for two. It was not a confrontation. In the absence of slammed doors, threats, or ultimatums, only silence lingered in the air, a serene and shared disintegration. He lingered in the basement for hours on end, far more than he ever had before. At times, he would surface, covered in dust and lost in thought, muttering vague notions of rearranging boxes. At other moments, his return would go unnoticed by me. I began to retreat to my bed each night, the hallway light casting a soft glow, uncertain if he would ever join me there again. In time, I ceased to illuminate the room. That spring, I started to sense that I was merely a visitor in my own abode. We occupied the same space, yet we drifted past one another like unfamiliar faces at a bus stop. As I folded laundry in the living room, he would silently step over the clothes basket, words unspoken between us. I would prepare dinner and set his portion aside in the microwave. The times he consumed it, the times he chose not to. One afternoon, I returned from the grocery store to discover that Ellis had emptied the hallway closet. Not everything, only my belongings. My raincoat, my gardening gloves, the scarf that Brenna had lovingly knit for me last Christmas, all folded and arranged with care in a cardboard box by the door. When I inquired about it, he replied bluntly, stating that I required more space. There will be no expressions of regret, no elaboration needed. In that instant, I realized I was being gradually pushed aside, bit by bit, space by space. Yet, I chose not to engage in a dispute. I refrained from screaming. Instead, I ascended the stairs, removed my shoes, and perched on the edge of our bed for nearly an hour, gazing at the spot where his slippers once lay. In the early days of July, I gathered a modest bag and set off to Brenna's for the weekend. I confided in Ellis that I required a pause, a moment to gather my thoughts. He made no inquiry about my destination. He remained engrossed in his crossword puzzle, not even glancing up. His only response was a simple, "Okay." Brenna refrained from probing too deeply, yet her eyes betrayed a curiosity that spoke volumes. The anxiety, the pain. Without uttering a single word, she prepared the guest bed, then joined me on the couch, cradling a mug of tea and wrapped in a blanket. We sat together, the screen flickering with familiar reruns, yet neither of us truly engaged in the unfolding scenes. It was clear to both of us that I would not be returning to the life I once knew. And so it was that I found my way back home on Sunday night. As I swung open the front door, darkness enveloped the room, the television flickering in the silence, while a solitary plate of food sat abandoned on the counter. Ellis was absent. The house was enveloped in a silence so profound it seemed to have lost the very art of breathing. I lingered in the kitchen, time stretching endlessly as I awaited an elusive something, a sound. The door let out a soft creak, a whisper in the silence, yet nothing arrived. Then arrived the morning that irrevocably broke the facade of what had once been a marriage. On a Tuesday, the world unfolded in its usual rhythm. June 21st. I recall it vividly, for it was the summer solstice, the day that boasts the most sunlight, yet it ultimately felt like the deepest shadow had fallen. Ellis mentioned that he was on his way to the store to pick up some milk. I scarcely lifted my gaze from my gardening gloves as I gave a slight nod. He departed, leaving the door ajar in his wake. Having completed the task of trimming my houseplants, I meticulously wiped down the counter, then settled into a moment of anticipation, listening for the familiar sound of the car's return. It never happened. As the evening settled in, I found myself pacing. As the clock struck midnight, I dialed his number, sent directly to voicemail. I sent a message, followed by another, and then 5 additional ones. As dawn broke, I filed a report declaring him missing. 2 days later, his wallet was discovered resting in the front seat of his car, which was parked off a dirt road an hour to the north. The keys remained nestled in the ignition. No evidence of a struggle was present. There were neither footprints nor witnesses to be found. The authorities suggested it appeared to be a case of suicide. It was said that he might have ventured into the river. Occasionally, individuals select secluded locations for the sake of solitude. Yet he departed without a word, without a sign, without a farewell. Only a toothbrush rests in the bathroom, a pair of shoes lies by the back door, and an empty bed awaits, destined to remain so for years. All believed I had reached the end, that I would let go, part with the house, reconstruct my life and find solace. Yet I refrained, for anger did not reside within me. I wasn't even shattered. I felt empty, silently broken, and that was, in some inexplicable way, even more distressing. With Ellis's disappearance, the very essence of time lost its significance. The initial weeks unfolded in a haze of inquiries, compassion, and an abundance of casseroles. Individuals from my past, with whom I had lost touch, reached out with heartfelt cards. Brenna arrived and lingered for some time. Without a word of permission, the neighbors took it upon themselves to mow my lawn. Women from the church delivered a comforting dish of tuna noodle bake and a sweet peach cobbler, each adorned with handwritten prayers affixed to the foil lids. Yet, As the second month unfolded, the calls began to dwindle. As the third unfolded, inquiries for updates dwindled to a halt. You'll navigate this, they would assure. Or perhaps something even more dire. Perhaps it is a hidden blessing. No one voices that to a widow, yet I wasn't one, not in the strictest sense. I existed as something entirely different, an essence more complex and elusive. A woman without her partner, existence suspended, an inquiry devoid of resolution. A funeral was not held for me, at least not immediately. For months, I clung to the hope that he was still with us. My mind was a labyrinth of tangled reasoning. Perhaps he had experienced a breakdown. Perhaps he found himself in a hospital, grappling with the shadows of amnesia. Perhaps he had fled and now felt the weight of his decision. With each ring of the phone, a small flicker of hope ignited within me, whispering that it might be him on the other end, clarifying, expressing regret, returning home. Yet the phone seemed to summon nothing but bills, relentless telemarketers, or, even more disheartening, an echoing silence. Ultimately, I succumbed to the weight of expectation. A memorial was held. There is no one present, merely a framed photograph of Ellis from our recent getaway in the Poconos, poised on a dock, waving, and smiling as if everything was perfectly fine. I lingered next to that photograph, exchanging handshakes with those who praised my strength. I find myself at a loss, unable to recall a single word I uttered. The memory lingers, the heaviness of my black dress enveloping me, while Brenna's grip on my hand was fierce enough to leave crescent-shaped imprints on my skin. Following the service, I returned home and slipped beneath the covers, fully clothed. I gazed up at the ceiling fan, attuned to its rhythmic whirring. The sound of clicks echoed, each rotation drawing me deeper into a trance of immobility. I ceased responding to the doorbell's persistent chime, ceased the ritual of checking the mail, ceased my visits to the grocery store. The refrigerator stands as a testament to neglect, overflowing with decayed remnants of meals past and yogurt long past its prime. I endured with nothing but saltines, canned peaches, and black tea. There were moments when I completely abstained from food. I allowed the garden to wither away. The weeds flourished unchecked, encroaching upon the stone path we had painstakingly crafted together long ago. From the kitchen window, I observed them devour the flowers, each one disappearing into their insatiable hunger, while I remained too weary to intervene. In the quiet of the night, I would settle into his chair by the flickering fireplace, holding one of his worn sweatshirts as if it still held the essence of him. It did not. The air was infused with the scent of dust mingling with fabric softener. Yet I clung to it. At times, I found myself conversing with it, posing inquiries that remained unanswered by anyone. What prompted your departure? Did you harbor any resentment towards me? Have I overlooked something? The house creaked and shifted, as if it carried a sorrow of its own. The basement was, without a doubt, the most dreadful of all. I steered clear of it as if it were cursed. The door remained firmly closed for months on end. I reassured myself that it was merely storage, just clutter, just shadows lingering in the corners. Yet, beneath the surface, an unsettling sensation lingered within me, suggesting that something resided in those depths. So not Ellis, not in the most literal sense. Yet, the version of him that always eluded my grasp. The responses, the undeniable reality. His absence enveloped the space like a thick fog. On that singular occasion when I ventured down, I barely managed 3 steps before I found myself retreating. The atmosphere felt oppressively thick. The silence is deafening. As the first anniversary of his disappearance approached, I found myself confined within the walls of my home for weeks on end. My garments draped loosely from my frame. My reflection appeared as a stranger, ghostly, weary, and aged beyond my recollection. On that night, I found myself at the kitchen table, illuminated by the soft glow of a solitary candle. I filled a glass with wine and raised it in salute to the vacant chair opposite me. "Happy anniversary," I murmured softly. My voice faltered on the second word. Then I extinguished the flame of the candle. For a fleeting instant, I contemplated extinguishing all that surrounded me as well. I did not. not due to my strength, but rather because I was too numb to take a step. I found myself at the depths, and there was no fire, no chaos, no cries of despair. The stillness enveloped the surroundings. The silence enveloped everything, a void that no melody, no prayer, nor even the comfort of a warm casserole could penetrate. It was the quiet understanding that you had never truly been acknowledged. And now, there remained no one to witness your presence. At that moment, I was unaware, yet a transformation within me had quietly begun, with deliberate slowness and hushed tones. Within that profound silence, a seed lay dormant, destined to flourish years later, sparked by a solitary line in a birthday card that would alter the course of everything. The card appeared on the morning of my 64th birthday, quietly slipped beneath the door as if it were a secret that no one dared to present face to face. By that time, existence had continued, though not in the form I once knew, but rather in a more subdued manner. My days were consumed by the gentle art of gardening, the pages of books turning softly in my hands, while I steered clear of the rooms that lingered with the haunting presence of Ellis. Birthdays have lost their luster for me, and I find myself not expecting much from them anymore. A simple call from Brenna, perhaps accompanied by a slice of cake, should I have remembered to bake it. On that particular morning, as I stood in the kitchen preparing tea, my gaze fell upon an envelope resting on the floor. No stamp present. There is no address provided. Only my name, Marla, inscribed in a script I hadn't encountered in 2 decades. I remained motionless, my gaze fixed upon it for what felt like an eternity, until the kettle's piercing shriek broke the silence behind me. The sharp sound of the whistle startled me, yet my gaze remained fixed on the envelope. My fingers quivered as I grasped it, cautiously unfolding it as if it were a volatile secret waiting to be revealed. Within lay a birthday card, ordinary, soft-hued, inexpensive. Yet the words within caused my knees to tremble. Wishing you a joyous birthday, Marla. I have always remained here. Search the basement. The card slipped from my grasp. It wasn't fear that held me back, not precisely, but rather the sensation that the room had shifted, as if gravity had unexpectedly altered its course. For 20 long years, I had held the conviction that Ellis was no longer among the living. 2 decades spent envisioning his last moments, envisioning a flowing river, a form adrift, surrendered to the relentless flow of time and tide. 2 decades crafting an end from the stillness. And now the script was undeniably distinctive. His capital M's were always adorned with a dramatic curve, while his lowercase e's resembled tiny backward 3s. I would often jest with him about it whenever he penned his Christmas cards. Once more it appeared, each letter flawless, each contour an allegation. I grasped the rim of the counter, striving to calm my breath. I considered every plausible scenario. A cruel prank, a counterfeit, perhaps Brenna orchestrating an intricate intervention to nudge me toward closure. Yet, none could decipher Ellis's handwriting quite like I could. And none were privy to the reality of what remained undiscovered in that basement. For years, I had steered clear of that space. I found myself unable to sift through his boxes, the memories wedged between dusty photo albums and cracked VHS tapes too overwhelming to bear. The basement resembled a graveyard, and I had allowed it to remain in that state. Yet now it beckoned to me. I seized the flashlight and compelled my feet to move toward the basement door. The knob was icy to the touch, a stranger in this moment. I flipped the switch at the top of the stairs, yet the overhead bulb had long since extinguished its light. The steps creaked under the burden of my presence. Upon arriving at the bottom, I found the air to be stale and motionless. The beam of my flashlight glided over the aged furniture, shrouded in yellowing sheets, while stacked boxes bore the labels Xmas and Brenna's school stuff. For years, everything remained still save for that one thing. In the dimmest recess of the room, adjacent to the furnace, there lay a section of wall that appeared subtly askew, its surface unnaturally pristine, almost too polished for its surroundings. I moved forward cautiously, my heart racing in my chest. The beam of the flashlight wavered uncertainly. I struck it with a sharp motion, whispered a curse under my breath, and then aimed it once more at the wall. I extended my hand, letting my fingers glide over the paneling, tracing the seam with a delicate touch. A slender, almost imperceptible fissure. I exerted force. Initially, all was still, but then, with a gentle pop, the panel yielded. A concealed entrance. My breath hitched. At the back lay a slender recess, too small to be considered a room, yet sufficiently profound to conceal something significant. I unearthed a box cloaked in dust. It bore a weight far greater than its appearance suggested. Within lay an assortment of files, letters, and photographs, each one a testament to lives not my own. Images of Ellis surfaced, featuring strangers, a woman whose face was foreign to me, beaming beside him in a sunlit park, planting a kiss on his cheek at a charming beachside cafe. Young ones as well, a young lad and a young lass. They appeared to be around 8 to 10 years old. Letters bore the signature of Jonathan E. His middle name, Edward, appeared alongside driver's licenses featuring his likeness yet bearing another name. There were receipts from establishments he had never mentioned visiting, airline tickets, and a key to a storage unit. I plopped down abruptly onto the frigid concrete, the box resting in my lap trembling with anticipation. He was still alive. He was still there, not vanished into thin air. He had embarked on a new journey, leaving me behind. The sorrow I believed I had laid to rest surged forth, revealing itself anew. Deceit. My tears seared this time, not from sorrow but from fury, from humiliation, from the stark awareness that I had grieved for a man who had merely turned his back and continued on his path. For 2 decades, I had dwelled in the remnants of a narrative that was never real, and now, as I sat in the dim light, evidence resting in my hands and silence enveloping me, a singular truth emerged with startling clarity. Ellis had not disappeared. He had concealed himself, and at last, I was on the verge of uncovering the reason behind it. The box lingered on my dining table for 3 long days. I refrained from touching it again immediately. I was unable to. Each time I walked by, it seemed to throb with a life of its own. The truth within it seemed to pulse, anticipating. I found myself unprepared to revisit it, yet I was equally unable to set it aside. It lingered like an unhealable wound, one that stubbornly resisted any attempt at closure. On the first night after discovering it, sleep eluded me. I lay awake, the bedroom light casting a soft glow, my body curled toward the vacant side of the bed. I found myself waiting for the surge of anger, the kind that is sharp, loud, and blistering, yet it never arrived. What I experienced was a profound grief, more intense than I ever imagined. It is no longer grief for Ellis, but rather for the part of myself that once cherished him. The woman who had lingered, pleaded, grieved. The woman who had scrutinized her own value each day for 2 decades, pondering whether she had erred in some way. I had remained faithful to a specter, and even more tragically to a falsehood. At last, with that box of evidence before me, the enchantment shattered. A subtle transformation stirred within me, not akin to lightning, but rather reminiscent of a gradual, rolling tremor. The silence lingered, an enduring presence. The following morning, I awoke without tears. I adorned myself in attire, not clad in my usual sweats, but rather in a pair of jeans and a crisp shirt that had remained untouched for years. As I gazed into the mirror, the reflection revealed a woman I could scarcely identify. She appeared weary, yet an intriguing depth lay beneath the surface, a calmness I had not witnessed in many years. I filled a cup with steaming coffee, settled into my chair at the table, and once more lifted the lid of the box. This time I stood my ground. I meticulously examined each document. Correspondence from a bank account I was unaware of. A lease agreement from Minnesota, inscribed with a name that felt slightly askew. J. E. Garrison. Images of birthday celebrations featuring children that bear an undeniable resemblance to Ellis. A single photograph took my breath away. He cradles a toddler in his arms, a smile gracing his face. The young one possessed his chin. I was not merely erased. I found myself supplanted. Yet, rather than allowing that to drain me once more, an unusual tranquility enveloped me. For in that moment, clarity dawned upon me. I had not let him down. He remained unbroken. He had not vanished without a trace, nor succumbed to despair or misfortune. He had made the decision to walk away, to embrace a different existence, to allow me to think he was gone rather than grant me the courtesy of a farewell. That decision had lost its hold on me. A shift in perspective unfolded before me. It's not solely about him. It's also about me. For 2 decades, I had muted my own brilliance, believing that I had somehow pushed him away. I had transformed into something diminutive, reserved, and wary. I had constructed a life woven from silence, treading cautiously through each day as if it might shatter beneath my feet. Yet, in this moment of clarity, I understand that I was never the one in need of repair. Ellis had displayed a lack of courage, a tendency towards deceit, and an undeniable frailty. And I remained in this place. I remained upright. The moment of realization arrived, accompanied by an unforeseen surge of strength. I rose from the table, made my way to the hallway closet, and retrieved the box of items he had stored away all those years past. The tattered raincoat from days gone by, the scarf lovingly crafted by Brenna, the gloves he once remarked gave me an air of a character straight out of a story. I carefully unpacked them. The coat found its place on the hook by the door. The scarf embraced my neck in a warm, cozy loop. I took a stroll. The air outside was distinct, more acute, as if it had been poised in anticipation of my arrival. I strolled by the overgrown hedges that had long escaped my shears, the mailbox that stood in disrepair, and the neighbors whose company I had shunned. I acknowledged the Andersons from my vantage point across the street. For a brief moment, they locked eyes, astonishment flickering across their faces, before they raised their hands in a wave. I continued my stroll, down the street, around the bend, heading toward the quaint coffee shop that Ellis and I frequented every Saturday. I chose not to enter, not at this moment. Yet, I lingered outside, gazing intently at the image mirrored in the glass. For the first time in years, I witnessed a woman awakening to life once more. Not due to Ellis, but rather in defiance of him. I kept my discovery to myself, sharing it with no one, neither Brenna, nor the neighbors, nor even the women at the quilting circle I had recently rejoined. To the casual observer, I remained the reserved widow, adhering to a familiar pattern in my daily life. At 7, the kettle sings its warm invitation for tea, followed by the gentle embrace of gardening at 10, and the rhythmic routine of grocery shopping every Thursday. Yet within, a spark had ignited, and I had no intention of dimming its light. With a sense of calm determination, I started my preparations in silence. Not driven by vengeance, not even from a place of bitterness. I had no desire for a theatrical showdown or to set his world ablaze. What I sought was authenticity and mastery. For 2 decades, I drifted aimlessly in a haze crafted by another's design. At that moment, I was crafting a route back to firm footing. With each step, a quiet resolve unfolds. Initially, I created duplicates. Each photograph, each and every document, each fragment of Ellis's concealed existence that I uncovered in the basement was meticulously scanned and preserved onto a USB drive. I designated the folder as House Repairs, anticipating that someone might occasionally take a look at my computer. Subsequently, I produced a second set and carefully placed it within a locked drawer in the guest room. The individual whom Ellis always held in disdain. The one featuring the creaky floorboard and a glimpse of the alley. Subsequently, I engaged the services of a private investigator. Not one of those television characters clad in trench coats and sunglasses. A reserved yet astute woman named Denise. She conducted her affairs from a humble office in the heart of downtown. She refrained from posing superfluous inquiries. I merely nodded while passing her the folder filled with counterfeit IDs, bank statements, and rental contracts, and declared, "I believe my husband is alive. I wish to uncover his whereabouts and the name he is currently going by." Her sole reply was, "You'll receive it in 10 days. That night, I drifted into a deep slumber, more restful than I had experienced in years. In the days that ensued, I implemented nuanced alterations. I had a meeting with a lawyer, during which I mentioned that I was going through some old documents just to be prepared. Our conversation delved into the intricacies of wills, the nuances of property rights, and the rather peculiar ramifications that arise when a spouse orchestrates the illusion of their own demise. I refrained from uttering Ellis's name, yet I caught the brief spark in the attorney's gaze when I alluded to the notion of long-term fraud. He provided me with a contact for a colleague who focused on family law and mentioned that I should reach out to her when the time was right. I inclined my head in agreement. In the quiet confines of my home, I undertook the task of cleaning the basement. I truly gave it a thorough cleaning. I sorted through boxes, relinquished items no longer needed, and methodically packed Ellis's old clothes into trash bags, all without a moment's hesitation. As I journeyed onward, I stumbled upon additional clues scattered along the path. Currency tucked away within the pages of forgotten tomes. A message hastily written on a napkin in an unfamiliar script. I preserved it all, meticulously cataloging and filing it away, as if constructing a case in silence, with careful deliberation and without uttering a single word. I found myself writing once more, not in the form of stories just yet, but rather in fragments of thoughts, memories, and small truths that I had kept silent for too long. In just a month, I managed to fill 3 journals. A few entries consisted of merely a single paragraph. Others were a torrent of unfiltered emotion, a raw outpouring that I did not restrain. I lingered in anticipation for your arrival. Your actions led me to doubt my value. I refused to be defined by you. I penned that last one on 2 separate occasions. In the act of writing, I found myself transformed. I began to dress with intention once more, not for the gaze of others, but for my own sense of self. Each week, I bring fresh blooms to adorn the dining table. I prepared complete meals even when I dined solo. I drew the curtains apart, allowing the sun to flood the room once more. The house had shed its spectral weight. The echoes of Ellis linger in that place, undeniably present, yet they no longer held dominion over it. I traversed the corridors as one who was taking back what had eternally belonged to her. Even Brenna remarked during one of our weekly calls, "You sound more buoyant." A smile graced my lips. "Perhaps I am." She refrained from pressing the matter. Though she never spoke it, the relief in her voice was unmistakable. It was 10 days later when Denise picked up the phone to call. She possessed an address, a name, and a photograph. Ellis, now known as Jonathan Garrison, resides in a charming 2-story colonial in Minneapolis, accompanied by a new wife, 2 children, and a black Labrador named Tank, beaming in the front yard as if he had never vanished from another existence, leaving no sign behind. I felt no anger. I felt no shock at all. I sensed a readiness within me, not to bring about his downfall, but to firmly embrace the truth I had diligently, and with quiet resolve, unearthed. And in that moment, I understood it was a unique form of strength, for while Ellis had constructed a life woven with deceit, I was, at last, embracing my own existence, each quiet step taken in the illuminating glow of truth. Power does not always descend with the force of a storm. At times, it slips in gently, reminiscent of the soft glow of dawn, gradual, unwavering, and utterly undeniable once it manifests. Once Denise handed me the photograph of Ellis, now known as Jonathan, standing in his new yard alongside a family I had yet to encounter. I found myself enveloped in silence for an extended period. I gazed upon his visage, those familiar weary eyes, that ever-present lopsided grin. He had aged, carrying a bit more weight, his hair touched with gray, yet it was unmistakably him. What captivated my attention was not the fact that he had moved on. It was the sheer ordinariness of his appearance, as if he had never fractured another's existence, as if he had never steered his way to the riverbank, leaving behind his history without uttering a single word of farewell. I refrained from reaching out to anyone. I remained composed, refraining from yelling, crying, or throwing anything. I effortlessly tucked the photo into a folder, my posture straightening more than it had in years. A change had occurred, and this time it resided outside of me. It resided within him. He remained blissfully unaware of it for the time being. For 20 years, Ellis had been the one crafting the narrative of our union. He selected the conclusion. He gently shut the door behind him. He excluded me from the narrative. Yet here I stood, grasping the undeniable truth within my palms. Recorded. Confirmed. Inarguably so. And I possessed a knowledge he lacked. He had lost his invincibility. I found my dignity without raising my voice. There was no necessity for me to shatter his existence in order to mend my own. What I sought was a sense of clarity. At last it was mine. I commenced my journey with careful, intentional strides. I revised my will, eliminating his name and any mention of next of kin. I composed a formal declaration of abandonment, which I then had notarized and duly filed. The attorney assisted me in initiating the process to officially declare him legally alive. Not due to any desire for something from him. Yet, I yearned for the return of all that he had left me ensnared in. The bewilderment, the uncertainty, the murky legal haze of a missing partner that had enveloped me for years. He believed I remained lost in that mist. Yet, I found myself not in that position. I found myself firmly anchored, and the earth below him was on the verge of trembling. In the meantime, I continued to navigate my days as I always had. I prepared a batch of muffins for the church bake sale. I assisted Brenna in selecting thoughtful gifts for her best friend's baby shower. I offered a warm smile to the cashier at the market. Not a soul suspected that anything had shifted. Yet all had transformed. On a quiet afternoon, I found myself at the bank where we once shared a joint account. I composed myself and presented the documentation that confirmed his existence. Proof of his fabricated persona, his failure to legally dissolve our marriage. The banker appeared both astonished and composed. She expressed her gratitude for the records and informed me that they would be passing the case along to their fraud department. I stepped outside, a newfound height in my stride. Not triumphant, absolutely certain. I had no need for root. The ultimate tipping point arrived via Brenna, though she remained blissfully unaware. One evening, she called and said, "You're not going to believe this, Mom." An email arrived from an individual by the name of John Garrison. He claimed he was once acquainted with Father. I stood still, caught in a moment of sheer disbelief. Did he mention anything further? I inquired with a sense of tranquility. He happened upon my name and felt compelled to reach out. Strange, isn't it? I requested that she send me the email. As I immersed myself in the words, the tone, the language, and the peculiar warmth enveloped me, revealing the unmistakable hand behind the writing. Ellis. He was attempting to return to the previous point. Perhaps it was the allure of curiosity that had overtaken him. Perhaps a sense of guilt. Perhaps he had detected an unspoken tension lingering in the atmosphere, a quiver in the very bedrock of the concealed existence he had crafted. I chose not to reveal the truth to Brenna. Not at this moment. In place of that, I penned him a letter. There is no return address provided. A simple typed note nestled within an unadorned white envelope. The box has been discovered. I possess a comprehensive understanding of all matters. Please refrain from reaching out to Brenna once more. You might have walked away from me, but I have finally turned my back on you. There are no threats present. There shall be no pleas, only clarity. I envisioned him unsealing it. The overwhelming sense of dread, the realization that the woman he had once dismissed now stood beyond the confines of his silence. For the first time, he found himself pondering what lay ahead. The equilibrium had altered, not with a thunderous explosion, but with a revelation that demanded to be acknowledged. It was not fury that led me to that bench in the park. It was neither vengeance nor malice, nor even a mere thirst for knowledge. It marked the end of a chapter. A term I once dismissed with a mere roll of my eyes now resonates within me, imbued with a profound and almost sacred understanding. I had no desire to raise my voice at Ellis. I found myself resisting the urge to strike him or to seek an explanation that I understood he would never be able to provide. I merely longed for him to notice my presence, the authentic version of myself, the woman he sought to obliterate. Once the letter was dispatched, I stumbled upon the box. I possess a vast array of knowledge. After a span of 6 days, he finally decided to make contact. An unadorned email. There is no subject line, only 3 lines of text. Allow me to elaborate. It was never my intention to cause you pain. Shall we arrange a time to meet? The screen held my gaze for what felt like an eternity. Then I responded with a message. 60 minutes, Valley Creek Park. Saturday. Midday. Enough is enough. The location was selected with great care. This is not our dwelling, not a place filled with shared memories. I selected a location that was neither here nor there. Exposed and communal, yet serene enough for the truth to take root. The park lay nestled midway between my home and the place Denise had mentioned as his current residence. I questioned whether he would confide in his new wife about our meeting. That was acceptable. I had no intention of causing any disturbance. I was present to complete the task at hand. I made my entrance ahead of schedule. The trees stood stripped of their foliage. The branches stand in sharp relief against a muted gray spring sky. A gentle breeze wafted the aroma of damp leaves and the faint trace of wood smoke from afar. I positioned myself at the far end of the bench by the creek, where the path bent subtly, allowing me to observe passers-by without revealing my presence too soon. And then he emerged. Ellis, or Jonathan, as he had chosen to identify himself. He moved with a deliberate slowness, reminiscent of an individual nearing the threshold of a crime scene. He appeared more aged than he did in the photograph, more slender. His hair had turned predominantly white. He donned a blue jacket, a striking hue that contrasted with the mundane surroundings, and clutched a folded piece of paper in his hand, its creases hinting at secrets yet to be revealed. Most likely a well-rehearsed performance, a certain level of skill demonstrated. He caught sight of me and became still. I remained still. After a brief pause, he made his way over and settled down, maintaining a respectful distance. A chasm lay between us, the sort that once brimmed with warmth. The air hung heavy with an unyielding chill, thick with the weight of unvoiced thoughts. He parted his lips. It has been closed. I chose not to assist him. At last he found his voice. I'm uncertain about where to start. For the first time, I turned to gaze at him completely. His eyes remained unchanged. Software, timid. There is nothing you could utter that would reverse it. I murmured softly. Feel free to proceed. Endeavor. He gulped with difficulty. I felt as though I was sinking beneath the waves. In those days, I sensed a profound insignificance within myself. I felt as though I was merely going through the motions. Each day unfolded with a familiar rhythm. I was unaware of anyone. It was an unexpected turn of events. It simply occurred, and I feared that if I remained, I would ultimately come to resent you, causing you greater pain. You inflicted deeper wounds. I responded, my tone unwavering. You allowed me to believe you were gone. You observed as I laid to rest an unfilled casket. You witnessed our daughter weep for a man who lacked the bravery to utter a farewell. He recoiled. I believed it would be more compassionate. Do not, I commanded with a cutting tone. Do not feign that this was an act of mercy. It was a veiled act of selfishness, masquerading as a vanishing trick. He gazed at the creek, filled with a sense of shame. He mentioned that he hadn't reached out to Brenna once more. I assure you, I believed that perhaps, after all this time, my purpose here isn't to find common ground, Ellis. He gazed at me once more with a depth of perception. I have come to unveil what you sought to conceal. I leaned in slightly, not out of anger but with a sense of weightiness. For 2 decades, I coexisted with your specter. I scrutinized every detail. Who I had been, the mistakes I made, and the possibility that it was all a figment of my imagination. I conducted a funeral for a man who opted to disappear instead of embracing the truth. Yet, I have ceased my lamentation. I have ceased my pondering. I am not your spouse. I refuse to be your victim. I exist as myself. And I arrived here to assure you that I recall every detail, and that fear no longer holds sway over me. Ellis remained silent. His hands quivered ever so slightly in his lap. The breeze danced through the foliage at our feet. Is that everything? After a brief pause, I inquired. He inclined his head with a deliberate slowness. Indeed. I rose, rearranged my scarf, and gazed down at the man who once encompassed my universe, now appearing so achingly diminutive. I grant you forgiveness, I declared, yet the memory shall remain etched in my mind forever. Then I strolled away, neither hastily nor with flair, but with intent. I chose not to glance back. After that final conversation in the park, I found myself not expecting anything further from Ellis. I had expressed my thoughts, met his gaze, and departed without a hint of remorse. I believed that was the conclusion, resolution. Yet destiny, as is its custom, had one final turn awaiting. Subtle rather than grand, yet imbued with a lyrical quality, it possesses a precise edge that evokes the essence of justice. 2 weeks later, I received a call from my lawyer, Judith, a woman with ice-blonde hair and a voice that resonated like glass. Her words were sharp and clear, devoid of unnecessary embellishments or gentle guidance. The perfect individual to have by your side as you navigate the complexities of 2 decades filled with silence and documentation. Marla, she said, you need to come in. Documents pertaining to Mr. Granger's second marriage have been received. Or, as I ought to express it now, a union of questionable legitimacy. I found myself in her office later that week, the familiar manila folder positioned between us, now swollen with legal findings and signatures, a testament to the time that had passed since I first handed it to her months ago. He never initiated the divorce proceedings, she remarked, her fingers gliding over the pages. In the eyes of the law, you remain his lawful spouse. My gaze lingered on her. Thus, he engaged in the act of bigamy. Indeed, he not only engaged in deceitful practices by opening multiple joint financial accounts under a false identity, but he did so while still legally bound to you in marriage. This behavior could be classified as fraud, encompassing tax fraud, identity misrepresentation, and potentially even insurance fraud, depending on the nature of any claims made following his death. Disbelief was my initial reaction. Ultimately, it was the anguish, the quietude, the forsakenness that revealed he had been the transgressor from the very beginning. Are you considering pressing charges? Judith inquired. I hesitated. The mere idea of courtroom theatrics, of pulling his second family into the mire, churned my stomach with unease. I had no desire to inflict suffering on those who were blameless. I never wished to transform into the very monster that instilled such fear in him, prompting him to orchestrate his own vanishing act.
No, Irraplia.
I have no desire for a trial. I seek a declaration. I desire for him to forfeit the privilege of continuing to live this deception. She inclined her head in agreement. Subsequently, we may proceed to submit a civil petition. You would be justified in nullifying his second marriage, reclaiming your property, and filing an official document that renders any legal assertions he has made under false pretenses as invalid. 2 weeks later, Ellis, or perhaps more accurately, Jonathan, received an official notification. The petition rendered his second marriage devoid of legal recognition. His bank accounts had been marked for scrutiny. His name was inscribed in a registry of deceit. Softly, meticulously, devoid of spectacle, the existence he crafted upon the remnants of my sorrow started to come apart. Yet that was not the moment that resonated with a sense of justice. It was on that fateful day that a letter arrived in the mail, not from Ellis, but from her Mara Garrison, the woman he had married under a veil of deception, the woman who had, for nearly 2 decades, inhabited the life I believed I had lost forever. The letter was penned with care, imbued with a sense of caution and respect. It all started in this manner. Though we are strangers, I find myself compelled to extend my sincerest apologies to you. She recounted how Ellis had laid bare all his secrets to her following the arrival of the legal notice. She was shattered, not merely by the deceit, but by the years of treachery, by the manner in which he had vanished from an entire existence, allowing another woman to bear the burden of his absence. She revealed that she had discovered the files he had concealed, the notes I had unearthed years afterward. She had faced him, and at last he had revealed the complete truth. She penned, I wed a man I had yet to truly understand, and you spent your days pondering the whereabouts of his departure. I apologize for my involvement in that, even if it was unintentional. I wish to convey that he has departed now. I have requested that he depart. The children and I shall embark on a journey of rebuilding, much like you once did. May your narrative eventually lead you to tranquility. I perused the letter thrice. With every passing moment, the burden in my chest began to ease just a bit more. He had lost everything, not due to my demands, but because the truth has a way of surfacing, no matter how cleverly it is concealed beneath fresh identities, bright smiles, and different postal codes. Our paths diverged, and I never uttered another word to him. I found it unnecessary. He had been revealed, not through force, nor through controversy, but through a calm, irrefutable reality. That was the justice I never realized I craved. For the true strength lay not in what I seized from him. It was within the realm I took back for my own. On a dreary Wednesday, as the rain pattered softly against the window, Brenna made the call. In the kitchen, I found myself wiping down the counters, remnants of my latest endeavor, a batch of lemon shortbread. It was the very recipe that Ellis once adored, though he never offered a word of gratitude for my efforts. In recent times, I found myself baking for my own enjoyment, no longer seeking to satisfy an elusive specter. The vibration of my phone broke the silence. The screen glowed with the brilliance of Brenna's name. "Hey, sweetheart," I murmured, bringing it closer to my ear. Her voice carried an unexpected gentleness. "Hello, mother. Are you occupied at the moment?" I had just completed my baking, I responded, picking up on a nuance in her tone. "What is happening?" After a brief moment of uncertainty, she finally spoke the words. "A letter arrived for me. Since the time spent with Dad, it has never ceased." Not quite. Yet, there was a stirring within me that could not be ignored. I shut off the sink faucet, dried my hands with a towel, and settled into a chair at the kitchen table. I inquired softly, "A letter?" Indeed, merely a few pages, written by hand, lacking a return address. He mentioned that he had been observing my life from a distance and expressed a hope that one day I would find it in my heart to forgive him. He claimed that his love for me never wavered. I shut my eyes. His audacity to reach out after everything was hardly a surprise to me. Yet the pain lingered. "What are your thoughts?" I inquired with caution. With a soft exhale, she let out a sigh. I chose not to respond. I believe I shall refrain from that. To be frank, I'm simply bewildered. He seeks absolution yet desires no connection. He expresses his regret, yet fails to provide any real insight into the reasons behind his departure. "That seems to resonate," I murmured gently. The line was enveloped in silence. Then she uttered a remark that took me by surprise. "Have you ever pondered whether he would return?" I pondered that notion, not in the realm of hope, that had perished long ago. Yet, when it comes to expectation, I often pondered if I ever genuinely believed that Ellis would one day show up, knock on the door, and admit he had erred. For an extended period, I found myself conceding to that truth. I often envisioned the doorbell chiming, him poised on the threshold, tears glistening in his eyes, offering apologies and weaving a tale of lost sanity or the desperate need for a fresh beginning. In the recesses of my mind, I crafted entire dialogues that never took place. In that moment, it dawned on me that his return was not something I truly desired. "Why not?" she inquired, for she had finally begun to appreciate the woman she was becoming in his absence. Brenna fell silent once more. The gravity of that statement hung in the air, enveloping her like a heavy shroud. "I've always been curious about what you've kept from me," she remarked. "In my youth, I believed perhaps it was too agonizing for you to share your thoughts. However, I believe I understand it now. You shielded me from the harsh reality." I inclined my head, despite her inability to perceive the gesture. "I never intended for you to bear his absence as if it were a weight upon your shoulders. I wished for you to embrace your life with freedom, unburdened by the pursuit of a mere shadow or the weight of resentment towards him. He has chosen his path. I hoped it wouldn't take away your happiness as well." Her voice trembled slightly. "You never spoke ill of him. I understand, yet that doesn't imply I held positive thoughts." She let out a half-hearted laugh. "Your strength surpasses anything I ever understood, Mom."
No, Irraplia.
I have shed my fears regarding the truth. We conversed for yet another hour, steering clear of Alice, instead delving into her work, her dog, the latest book club drama. Just a mother and daughter, at ease and complete. Once the call ended, I stepped out into the garden. The rain had ceased, leaving the world shimmering with a fresh, vibrant sheen. I strolled leisurely through the rows of lavender and rosemary, inhaling the scent of the damp earth. Brenna's choice of sides was unnecessary for me. There was no necessity for her to harbor animosity towards her father or to face him directly. What truly held significance was that she recognized my presence at this moment, not as a figure of fragility or tragedy, but as one who has traversed through flames and emerged unscathed on the other side. As the evening unfolded, I ignited a candle in the living room, filled a glass with wine, and immersed myself in a letter I had penned but never dispatched. It was directed towards Alice. Months ago, I penned it after discovering the box, concluded with a single line. "You vanished, yet I remained." Indeed, it was true. He had slipped away from our existence, yet I persisted. I had evolved. At last, my daughter perceived me not as a figure of abandonment, but as one who had ascended. A year had slipped by since the birthday card found its way beneath my door, altering the course of my life forever. The seasons passed, each one revealing yet another layer of my former self. And now, poised once more at the summit of the basement stairs, I found that fear had abandoned me. The light flickered to life as I switched it on. It flickered briefly before coming to life with a soft hum. I had rarely ventured down here since discovering the concealed box, only when necessity called for something from storage or to sweep away the final traces of Alice's meticulously orchestrated disappearance. Yet this evening carried an air of distinction. It was not merely an errand. It marked an ending. I descended with a measured pace, each step deliberate and unwavering. The space now exuded a sense of cleanliness, free from the remnants of cobwebs and the weight of clutter. The once musty scent had dissipated, giving way to the soothing aroma of lavender sachets and the crispness of fresh paint. In the far corner, where the false wall stood, I had transformed the space into a cozy reading nook, complete with an old armchair, a lamp casting a warm glow, and a woven rug underfoot, nothing extravagant yet inviting. Yet it belonged to me. As I settled into the chair, my gaze wandered, fingers wrapped around a steaming cup of peppermint tea, while a gentle rain drummed softly against the small window high above. The window I once shunned, fearful it might mirror the visage of someone lost, no longer holds that power over me. I reflected on the woman I once was, the one who occupied this very space with trembling hands and a box brimming with betrayal resting in her lap. She had dwelled in sorrow, not merely for a man, but for a whole iteration of her life that had never genuinely come to be. In my mourning for her, there was no sadness, only a profound respect, for she had endured trials that could have utterly hollowed her being. She not only weathered the silence, but she also forged a new voice within it. I once believed that closure signified answers, a revelation, a flawless, complete ending. Yet I have gained a deeper understanding. Closure is a decision one makes. It's stepping through the threshold that once shattered you, only to discover it has lost its grip on your spirit. For years, I lingered in a dim haze, carefully navigating the shadows of sorrow, anticipating a return that would remain forever elusive. Ellis had crafted his own departure, believing he could slip away unscathed. Yet, the truth possesses an uncanny ability to emerge from the shadows, not always with theatrics, but with unwavering conviction. When it finally arrives, it allows no space for shame or denial. It simply exists. I no longer bore questions as if they were heavy chains. Where has he wandered off to? What prompted his departure? What mistake did I make? Once, those questions had walked beside me. In that moment, they existed as phantoms, unaware of their own demise. I recalled Brenna's voice on the phone that day, imbued with a blend of cautious concern and quiet admiration. How she had truly seen me for the first time, not merely as a mother, the unwavering presence, the source of solace, the one who held everything in place, but as a woman who had endured loss, faced destruction, reconstructed her spirit, and continued to forge ahead. Ultimately, that was what held significance. It's not the act of falling that defines us, but rather the resilience found in rising again. I surveyed the basement again, observing the boxes now marked with clarity, the shelves cradling fragments of my history that had ceased to shape my identity. In the gentle illumination of the lamp, Light spills into the shadows that once lingered in the corners. As I delved into my pocket, my fingers brushed against the card, the very one that set everything in motion. The paper bore the marks of time, its edges frayed from countless openings and closings. I grasped it for a fleeting moment before rising and making my way to the room, merely sufficient to imbue the space with warmth. I activated it, observing the gentle dance of the flames, and then I surrendered the card to the fire, curled swiftly, darkening at the fringes. The words lingered, I never departed. Gaze into the basement, where it vanished into smoke and ash. In a certain sense, he was indeed correct. He was never truly gone. For years, I bore the ache of his absence. Yet, at this moment, I found myself deciding to release him. Not for him, but for myself. The ashes ascended, swirling into the air before disappearing entirely. A smile graced my lips. With purposeful steps, I ascended the staircase, extinguished the light, and gently shut the door behind me. Not due to fear of what lay beneath, but because I had finally carried the light with me, rendering the need to glance back obsolete.